as Joe Biden's mental acuity remains a concern to about 75% of American voters. Furthermore, Joe Biden isn't particularly popular. Only 40% of Americans actually approve of Joe Biden's job performance, with a whopping 55.5% of Americans disapproving of Joe Biden. Furthermore, Joe Biden is trailing Donald Trump in the national popular vote by 2% according to polling. That would be really concerning for Democrats, considering Joe Biden won the popular vote in 2020 by 4.5% and barely squeaked by in the Electoral College. However, despite how unpopular Joe Biden may appear, his alternatives might just be worse. Kamala Harris is likely going to be the replacement for the Democratic Party in the improbable scenario that Joe Biden does step down. According to some of the polling, despite how unpopular Joe Biden is, Kamala Harris actually fares slightly worse. Her net disapproval rating is 16.4%, slightly higher than Joe Biden, and her approval rating is 36.4%, even lower than Biden's approval rating. Furthermore speaking, she trails Donald Trump in the polling by 6.6%. That is much higher than Biden trailing Trump by 1.9%. The polling also suggests that it looks very bleak for her, as she trails in pretty much every single poll that has been taken. Now you see here that Trump is already at 49.3%. I expect most Biden supporters to end up voting for for Kamala Harris regardless. But still, it does not look good for Kamala Harris in such a scenario, where Trump is already almost at 50% of the popular vote, where Trump won just 46.8% of the popular vote in 2020. Now looking to the Electoral College map here, Kamala Harris at 138 electoral votes, to Donald Trump at 113 electoral votes. First off, I'm going to start off with Donald Trump's likely electoral votes. Alaska, South Carolina here probably will be safe because Kamala Harris is just a really poor candidate. We also see states like Iowa, Ohio, both states voted for Joe Biden by Joe Biden lost both states by 8%. We're definitely going to see Kamala Harris lose by at least that margin, if not in the double digits. I also think that for states like Texas and Florida, both these states voted for Donald Trump by relatively impressive margins. Texas is trending blue, but someone like Kamala Harris will just not be able to actually flip a state like Texas, where suburban appeal is necessary. I don't think Kamala Harris has any suburban appeal. Where we go to a state like Florida, for instance, you need Hispanic appeal. Again, someone like Kamala Harris just does not have a lot of appeal to voters, and that in general, her polling numbers are absolutely dismal. It just does not look like that she will actually win any of these states, and therefore these will be likely states for Donald Trump, states that he'll win by more than 5%. We also see that some of the traditionally safe Democratic states here are actually in the likely Democratic column. I do believe that if Kamala Harris is the nominee, that we do see that states like New Jersey and New York go actually under 12%. Kathy Hochul in the state of New York actually only won the state by 9%, despite the fact that Joe Biden was able to win the state in 2020 by 23 points. We also see that these states could actually be a lot closer with a poor Democratic nominee, which happens to be the case here. Kamala Harris is not a strong Democratic nominee. We also saw that Joe Biden did relatively poorly in the state of New Jersey, won the state by less than 16. The state has a very arguably corrupt senator, Robert Menendez, who could at least get primaried out or get convicted in the state. Not looking too good for Democrats. This could be, again, a likely state on the presidential level and a pretty competitive state as well on the Senate level. We also see that states like Colorado, New Mexico, and Virginia, these are states that probably do resent Kamala Harris more than someone like Joe Biden, but that these are states still that's going to vote for Kamala Harris. I think Maine's first district would be within 12 points, but still a comfortable margin for Kamala Harris. I do still think that Donald Trump will win Maine's second congressional district by about 10 points, a similar margin as he did in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. Now, I think here there will be another likely state for Donald Trump, being the state of North Carolina. This is a state that he carried by 1.3% in 2020, while not the most impressive and outstanding margin against Kamala Harris it should be sufficient for him to carry the state by 5%. Again, we see that someone like Kamala Harris would not do too well in areas like Mecklenburg County or any of the really urban regions, and that she'll probably not appeal to any rural voters, and as a result, just lose the state by more than 5%. Now, the final states that have not been characterized yet are in the lean or tilt margin, or states that are going to go for either candidate by less than 5%. I'm going to start off here with the state of Nevada. The state of Nevada here is the state that's trending towards Republicans, sorry. We see in the past two presidential elections in the state of Nevada, we did see that both those races voted for Democrats by 2.4%, but what we saw is that in 2020 there was a much more favorable national environment for Democrats, as Biden won the popular vote by 4.5%. Nevada voted to the right of the nation by about 2 percentage points. Considering how poorly that Kamala Harris is doing with the popular vote, is likely that she will lose the state of Nevada, and she is also not going to do well in a county like Washoe, which is more competitive, or the area of Clark County, where it has already been trending towards the Republican Party. I do expect that someone like Kamala Harris probably lose the state by a lean margin. Now going to the state of Arizona. The state of Arizona is trending blue, but a candidate like Kamala Harris simply will not carry the state. There's a lot of voters in the area of Phoenix who may have voted for Biden in 2020, who may even support Biden again in 2024, who simply will not vote for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is not the best candidate for more moderate voters, and I think that just in general, Democratic turnout will be quite low in such an election, where Democrats are generally not perceived very well right now by the American public because of the border crisis going down in around the area of Texas, and really just the current state of the nation not looking too good for Democrats, and especially Kamala Harris just won't be able to do very well with messaging or pretty much with anything, and therefore I do believe that Donald Trump will win the state of Arizona. Now going to the state of Georgia. Georgia is another state that is favorable for Democrats in terms of trends. By the end of the next decade, I do believe that, again, in the end of the 2030s, this will be a state that will be solidly in the Democratic column. However, again, someone like Kamala Harris, she's not going to appeal too well to the voters in the state of Georgia. There's a lot of voters in the area who are black who might be more happy to vote for Kamala Harris. Nonetheless, there are also white college-educated voters in the Atlanta region, which are voters that shifted towards the Democrats in 2020. I hesitate to see that these voters will continue voting for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump in 2024. They might not vote for Trump, but they're still also not going to vote, and that's going to hinder Democratic chances in the state, and as a result, I do believe that someone like Donald Trump will once again be able to carry the state of Georgia by probably 3 to 4 points, which is slightly lower than his 2016 margin, but still pretty good for Donald Trump. Now, I do think that means at-large vote will probably go for Kamala Harris. It's still a solidly Democratic region, and I think that New Hampshire as well, we did see the Republican primary there. There was a lot of support for Nikki Haley. I think based on that, we still see that probably Kamala Harris does end up winning the state of New Hampshire. And I'm also going to give this state of Minnesota away to Kamala Harris here. This will be a close state for sure. We did see that Trump lost the state to Joe Biden by more than 7 points, and that's a sign that he probably won't win the state, although there's a lot of white college-educated voters who might vote against Kamala Harris. I still think that the state will vote for Kamala Harris by a margin of about 1 percentage point. Now going to the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin has shown that actually out of the 3 Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin has some of the closest polling numbers because the state is more favorable for Democrats on one issue, the issue of abortion, where a lot of voters in the state do care about that issue. However, again, I do not believe Kamala Harris will be too effective on messaging, and Joe Biden is trailing the state according to polling by about 1.5%. Considering that Kamala Harris is a worse candidate, I struggle to see how she's gonna win a state that Joe Biden won by less than 1 point in 2020. I think this will be a state, again, where the wild counties might actually turn back a little bit for the Republican Party, and therefore lend Donald Trump a pretty comfortable victory of about 2 or 3 points. Now, without going to Michigan or Pennsylvania, we already see that Donald Trump has won the presidency against Kamala Harris. I do think Nebraska's second congressional district here will go to probably Kamala Harris because of the fact that this is a relatively urban district based in the region of Omaha, an area that is white college educated and that is trending towards the Democratic Party. Now going to the next state, the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan is not looking too good for Democrats in terms of polling, where Joe Biden is actually trailing Donald Trump by close to 3%, according to many polls. Now, considering again that Kamala Harris is probably going to do worse than Joe Biden, it's definitely not looking too good for the Democrats in general. I don't think Kamala Harris will be able to do well in areas like Kent County or areas like Oakland County, which are largely suburban and which are more white college educated. This is a group of voters that Kamala Harris generally lacks in. And I think that overall her appeal will not be good enough in a state like Michigan as well to end up actually winning. I think that probably in all likely scenarios that Donald Trump does end up narrowly winning the state of Michigan. Now going to the state of Pennsylvania. Republicans still have a lot of potential in the rural areas of the state, and the Democrats need to counter them in the areas of Philadelphia. The problem here is that, again, I think that someone like Kamala Harris would not be able to drive up voter turnout. I think even Joe Biden here, who is relatively old and does have concern, there's a lot of concern over his mental acuity. I think even he will end up driving up more turnout for Democrats than someone like Kamala Harris, who is relatively less experienced and relatively just not so well perceived by voters. We see that in a poll against Donald Trump, Trump is almost at 50%. It's going to be really hard to see her actually winning the election in a state like Pennsylvania, which is pretty much the most important state in a presidential election, the bellwether state. It's going to be hard to see how she wins a state like Pennsylvania, where suburban voters is key to winning the actual state. I do believe that, again, Donald Trump will win the state, and with that prevail in the Electoral College in a margin of 312 to 226. This would be a pretty darn good performance for Donald Trump, and pretty on par with what his polling numbers suggest. Anyways, thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.